Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's Wednesday, April 13th, a little after 7:30 p.m. I'm going to call this special board meeting to order, and Janet, will you do roll call?
Charles Black-Lance.
Here.
Kevin Boyles.
Here.
Tom Hageland.
Here.
Ruth Nelson.
Here.
Jana Shogren.
Here.
Sarah Spear.
Here.
All present.
Okay, thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. We are recording this meeting, and access will be made available on the school district's website after the interviews are completed. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So move.
Second. Sorry. First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Shogren. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Tonight, there's no public input as this is a special board meeting, and we will get started right away with the interview of Mr. Eric Snyder. And again, we'll keep this very informal. Just pop in as you want to ask a question. And does anyone want to start, or I can start us off? I will start us off? Okay. Good evening, Eric. Thank you for being with us and this long day, and I'm hoping you've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about strategic planning. You did mention that as part of your entry plan. So if you could just share any experience you have in this area and how you would create a strategic plan, how would you go about creating a strategic plan in Brainerd, our next superintendent?
Yes. Strategic planning, I think, is a reflection of where the school district is at that moment and for the foreseeable future, right? That's the point. My thinking around strategic planning for Brainerd would be very focused on issues around enrollment. I've talked about that a bit today in the different sessions that I've been a part of. And so, the process of building a strategic plan is a very collaborative process. In my experience, a lot of the inspiration for the strategic plan comes from the board. The experience I've had has been, in a district that was really focused on innovation, and so a lot of our strategic plan was directly related to the desire for more innovative programming. But the purpose of that was to attract enrollment. It was to continue to grow an already innovative school district, to grow that innovation footprint, and to create more programming more specialized programming that would appeal to families really looking for a unique kind of a experience. So that's my experience here most recently. And when I was directly involved, going to all-day retreat with the board, actually unpacking sort of the success that we'd had over the previous years, talking about what the best steps forward might be. Pretty free exchange of thoughts and ideas, pretty open. Again, very collaborative. But I would describe it as a little bit kind of free flowing of sharing of ideas, et cetera. Always with the expectation that by the time we got to the end of the retreat, however long that would be, 2 days, 1 day, that we would, there'd be poster paper on the walls, if you can imagine, but by the end of the time together, we would have sort of crystallized into some key themes, and then the board chair or board leadership would go away and sort of draft a first reading of those strategic plans, and there'd be a couple of rounds back and forth. We'd look at the draft, we'd comment, et cetera. By the time we got to first week of September, we had a good plan. So that's the experience I had. Now, when I look at Brainerd and the possibility of coming here and working with all of you to build a strategic plan, I wouldn't see it as the exact same kind of an environment for strategic planning. I would see it much more around, trying to understand exactly why we're seeing the declining enrollment and what specifically is the cause for that. I'd want to be looking at a lot of data. I'd want to be, looking at interviews with parents who've chosen to take their kids out of the district. I'd want to be working with all of you to really make sure we understand the problem and then start to build a strategic plan around, what do we do for the next 3 years, 5 years, whatever your timeline is. I think some of the most effective strategic planning is actually done in a little bit more of an agile fashion, a little bit more on an annual basis, but a lot of school districts do a more traditional 5-year plan. But I would be looking personally, my recommendations would be around focusing on academic achievement. I've talked about that prior and all day today, that's got to be the focus for any kind of an effort to bring families back to the district. I'd want to be looking at school culture. I'd want to be looking at innovative programming that we think is appealing to families and making sure that those programs are successful, et cetera. I'd want to be looking at just overall customer service across the district. Just making absolute certain that we are all working from the same sort of training manual when it comes to customer service, because I think that's critical to making sure that families who we may have lost are going to consider coming back to us. And then for me, I think the last thing, and I don't know enough about Brainerd yet to really have a strong opinion here, but the last one's about branding and just how how the reputation of the district, what the measure of that is in the community. There's been some divisive issues in the community, and just to see kind of have some sense of where people are at as far as the brand or the reputation of the district, and see if there's work to be done there. Those would be the areas that I would want to be talking about with all of you, looking at a strategic plan. But for me, it would be very focused on enrollment, be very focused on parent and customer satisfaction around around the performance of the district in anticipation of an operating levy. And that, to me, would be everything that we'd be talking about, would be planning, positioning, making sure that we're listening closely to the concerns of the community and getting to a point where, we can say with confidence that the community is ready to support an operating levy. And I don't know what the runway is. If that's 3 years, I think that's a safe guess. But everything done strategically, in my opinion, should be focused on enrollment and then getting to that place of customer satisfaction in the community that they're going to want to say yes to an increase in taxes.
Thank you.
Eric, I'd like to take that just a little bit further. And I love the fact that you're strategically thinking and strategic plan. You had made a comment on our first visit about building a team of excellence and aspiring to achieve excellence with the team. You've also referenced accountability, which is so critical in order to carry out a successful strategic plan. And in my mind, it's critical in order to advance us from being a good district to a great district. Right. You need to do that. I suspect, reading some comments and feedback, that, not only do I suspect, but I know that whether it's in the school districts or in business, when you talk about accountability, that gets some people in leadership nervous. Yeah. Because we're going to hold them accountable for achieving and reaching these benchmarks and these goals. How have you gone about gaining that respect and from your direct reports that allow you to hold them accountable to achieve the common goal of excellence and really to advance this forward? Some are okay with good. I'm really pushing for us to be great, and it takes out-of-box thinking for that to happen.
Yeah, I just don't think that you achieve greatness and expect comfort at the same time. There's going to have to be some discomfort. I think if I were in your shoes and I was interviewing a candidate that said, we're going to achieve excellence and it's going to be really easy, and nobody's going to have to stretch, and nobody's going to ever feel uncomfortable, I wouldn't vote for that candidate. So, I'm not going to say that it's going to be easy, but what I would say is when people are part of that kind of a process where excellence is the goal, and where goals are set really clearly, and we're very straightforward about expectations, when they're successful in that kind of an environment, then you build momentum. And I think, people don't volunteer for stretch goals. That's not especially in a work environment, that's just not what people do. As a leader, you have to help people stretch. And, it's not just setting stretch goals. It's helping people aspire to a higher level of their own performance and then helping them get there. Right? You don't just sit back and watch somebody succeed or fail. And so for me, in my experience, it is uncomfortable. But when you get, and maybe it's 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road, but when you start to have success in that environment, it's a fantastic feeling. And you don't get there if you weren't in some way, shape, or form pushed there. Because it's just not common for people to step up and volunteer goals that they don't know for sure they can reach. So that's that for me. When you're talking about accountability in that kind of an environment, you have to challenge people, and hopefully at the same time you're building relationships with them, and they can see you're not just setting stretch goals and holding them accountable. You're a genuine person too, who cares about their families, and you're side by side rolling up your sleeves when times get tough. It's a combination of those things. But, again, I don't think you achieve excellence in an organization if there isn't some level of tension or discomfort or, being pushed to accomplish something that you maybe didn't think you could do, right? And I just think too often in education, this is just my opinion, too often we don't have the courage to set those ambitious goals. And I think a lot of times the community sees that, and they get disappointed because we're satisfied with mediocrity. And, when you talk about good to great, when I was here last week and you said that, that really resonates with me. I think we owe that to kids. And I think too often as the adults, we let kids down because we don't push ourselves to be ambitious, to aspire to something that, the trend line might say we can't do that, but maybe we can. I think it's, when I talk about being held accountable, I'm not talking about, hey, if you don't hit these goals, then you don't have a job. It's, these are our goals, and we're going to talk about these, and we're going to see what resources you need to get there, and then we're going to see what your leadership can do. And I would expect you do the same of me, right? That you would look at me and say, we're good, but we want to be great, and this is what that's going to look like. Here's where we want to be. When I look at your science scores and you're 17 points beyond the state, and you're ahead of everybody in the Lakes Conference, and you're beating all your regional comparison districts, that's something to be really proud of. I don't know how that happened, what happened instructionally or within the academic program that led to that kind of success. But that's pretty aspirational, to beat the state by 17%. And you might ask yourselves, could we go further? That might be really appealing to employers to know that you're achieving at that level and competing and beating out districts in that particular content area. That's attractive to families and businesses. And I think, when you can start to have those kinds of aspirational goals, and as you've done, have success in that, that's a lot of fun.
So build on that just a little bit. I think there was a good answer, at least from my perspective. Rock solid methodology in terms of stretch goals. Those are all the right framework things that resonate with me. So that's the philosophical side of it. You mentioned in your answer, that when you assess the stress or assess or put out the stretch goal, right, the next role as a leader is in my world, I refer to it as being the fullback. That sometimes it's getting out and blocking for
Yep,
those people so
absolutely.
they can score the touchdown, something like that, right? So can you describe a little bit about, just situationally and sort of your philosophy and maybe an example or two of, how you've maybe done that before or how you foresee yourself doing that here for our staff, specifically the direct reports that would work for you?
Absolutely. I feel like, I think, I've worked alongside a lot of principals who were staring at goals they didn't think they could reach. And, for me, one of the most rewarding, parts of my work is to be able to help them reach those goals, right? Because that's, as I said a minute ago, there's no better feeling as a leader than to reach a stretch goal. And so using the fullback analogy, I would say, I would give an example, like when I just had come to Minnetonka and the immersion program was starting to move to the secondary level, Chinese and Spanish immersion, which is, that's a needle that's tough to thread, to offer immersion in Spanish and Chinese languages alongside English programming. So we were essentially running 3 academic programs side by side. And as we were getting to the secondary level, there's a lot of fear that we couldn't continue to hit the levels of fluency that we were hitting at the K-5 grades. And so, myself working alongside the middle school principals saying, okay, the community has an expectation for a certain level of achievement in these languages. We don't have great models to go study because there's nobody doing this really well. So we have to figure this out, right? So it's a matter of really trying to take our best professional judgment and apply it to a problem where there's no solution. So, in that particular situation, we had to go find resources that didn't exist. We had to bring teachers together and build, academic programming that didn't come off of a shelf. We had to do it was all in-house design, right? And it was a high wire act because we had a lot of community members who had an expectation for their sons and daughters. They'd committed to this program, and if we failed at that point, the disappointment on the part of those parents would have been significant, right? And so, I'd never done that before. I'd never built an academic program in Mandarin and Spanish at middle school and high school, but I participated in every conversation working with the principals and the teachers, and we built that program, and we monitored it closely. We watched carefully every step of the way, and we had the achievement that we were expected to get. And so I wasn't the principal, of the building, but I was the fullback blocking. I was bringing resources to the conversation. I was, doing the not so glamorous research of trying to find out who can we talk to, who can we call, who are the experts in this field that we can tap. So, it's every situation is a little bit different, but you have to be, you can't just set stretch goals for people and then walk away and not give them any kind of support or what have you. And so, it's you have to have that level of commitment to the success of the people that you're working with, and that's an example I can give you. I hope that's fair, but okay.
Eric, you touched on enrollment and how that would be an important part of a strategic plan for our district. And I heard you during the community session say that you have a hunch about what's going on or what has gone on with our enrollment. So I want to know what your hunch is and what you do about it.
Yeah. Well, and it's a little bit, it's a little tricky to make a lot of assumptions when, I'm just looking at the data here in the last few weeks, and I don't have the luxury of having long conversations with people who've been looking at this problem for a lot longer. So when I say hunch, I mean, I'm making some guesses. And I'm, comparing it to what I've seen in other districts, what I've personally experienced, and what I think a lot of districts have been experiencing over, during COVID. So, but, my hunch is that the masking caused some families to choose other options, private schools, homeschooling, neighboring districts, and all three of those we can get back. And that's a bold statement, but I say in general, those are three reasons for declining enrollment where there's a solution. Now, if you tell me that the birth rate is on a natural decline, that's a harder one for me to fix, right? Or any of us to fix. But I don't have data to tell me that the birth rate is in decline in this community. I looked for that information and I couldn't find anything conclusive. Maybe you all have that data, but if it comes down to families that have turned away from the district because of the masking policy or some of the entanglements around equity and what have you, then I'd like a chance to get those parents back and those families, and I'd like the chance to talk to them, at least to learn about what it might take to bring them back. I think it's important, and I'll tell you this. I mean, we were doing this before COVID. That's my experience in Minnetonka, and I don't mean to keep talking about Minnetonka, but I mean, we constantly called families who had chosen private schools, and we asked them to please come take a tour, let us show them some of the new programming we've introduced. We never stopped trying to get them to come back. And there were some really nice private schools that families had chosen, and they were very happy. But they got a call from us every year. And I just feel like this is a unique set of circumstances with COVID and what have you, the issues that you all have been wrestling with, and you're familiar with those. But I think it's time to start reaching out to the community and try to repair some of those divisions and tell the good news about what's happening in the schools and get them into the buildings and see the beautiful renovations and really build a presentation model that all the principals are fluent in, and they all are bringing folks in with the same kind of red carpet treatment and high touch customer service, and you will get families back. So when I say hunch, it's kind of a terrible way to describe it, but I don't want to appear that I know more about families' reasons than I do. I haven't talked to any families in Brainerd. I don't know specifically what their reasons are, but my hunch is it's some of these predictable reasons that I've listed. And if I were the superintendent here, I would like my chances of getting families back, and that would be my focus. Okay. Because that's our revenue stream, and that's I don't like the future at a 10-15% decline, and I don't think the staff likes that either, and I don't think it's going to be good for kids. So to be motivated to bring families back, rebuild trust with the community, get that levy passed down the road, all the strategic planning I would want to do with you all would tie into those specific things.
I've got a question for you kind of around innovation, and I know that's your strong suit, so I just want to dig into that a little bit. And I would argue that K-12 is a hotbed for innovation. I think it's happening all the time. I think the tools, the frameworks, the technologies, I think in a micro aspect is happening all the time. But on a grand scale, how do you make room for that in a slim budget? The manpower, the experimentation, the resources it takes. And then, second question to that, we've got a workforce that's really weary. They've been through a lot of chaos and change. And how do you travel that path and commit to efficacy and best practices as you're kind of boiling the ocean?
Yeah. So the first part of the question there, you've got to really choose carefully. You can't chase every innovation. And I think that's where a lot of mistakes get made is it's sort of throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. And you don't have, to your second point, you don't have the capacity to drive innovation in that way. So it's got to be, so my approach to doing it is to be very selective about what we choose to test. And I'm not saying be selective about what we choose to implement. I'm saying be selective about what we choose to test, because you have to get through several rounds of testing before you have any chance of being funded and scaled, right? So, to me, that's, again, where we make a lot of mistakes in innovation and education is we don't honor that kind of iterative process, right? Where you have to be very careful about which ideas you choose. Out of 100 ideas, you may only be choosing 2, right? So you got to pick the right 2. And there's a science to that. And then when you pick those ideas that you want to try, then it's a careful kind of scientific process of testing, sandbox, get data on that initial test and improve the solution and iterate. And by the time you get to something that needs funding, maybe I talked about this last week, I'm forgetting, but in my experience, by the time you're coming to the board or somebody who manages a budget to say, this idea is ready to be funded, it's a guarantee. Our job is to minimize the risk when it comes to innovation, because these are taxpayer dollars, right? So every innovative program that I took forward as an assistant superintendent, it was a layup. It was an easy basket because we had done all the testing. We'd done all the modeling. We knew exactly what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. And I think it's nothing more elaborate than the scientific process of taking an idea into a laboratory and carefully studying it and testing it before you take it out and try to put it in the marketplace. So for me, that's the first part of the question, is about how do you do that? And the way that I could go into the how we chose the 2 out of 100, because there is a science to that. We used a platform where we did a lot of socializing around ideas and voting, to be honest, within staff. So there are some ways to do that I've done that I think work really well. But I will say this: you're right. There's a lot of exhaustion, and I think that you have to be very careful about what's the capacity of the organization to innovate. And I don't have a finger on the pulse here in Brainerd. You all know better than I do, but you have to be very careful about that. I will say this, though: it's a little counterintuitive, but it's actually pretty life-giving when people see ideas that they were connected to come to fruition, right? And I've seen that. I mean, I've seen, because again, the best ideas are going to come from people in the front line, and that's where I've always gone to get the best solutions. And when those folks who work on the front line see that their ideas are influencing the design of the innovation, there's a high level of buy-in and excitement, and it's pretty surprising. I think, in my experience, I just think in education, frontline staff aren't included in that in a meaningful way typically, and so they don't really have that pride of ownership of the innovation. But if you can build a system that does that, it actually builds the culture. It actually restores energy, and instead of people being tired, they're actually enthused and excited about what's happening. And that's really what you want. You want a work environment where people are excited about what's happening, and they can see their autograph on it. They know that they were a participant in designing that idea. And in my opinion, that's a counterbalance to the exhaustion that people feel, that I think is hopeful.
How would you go about making space for that? I'm thinking about, so if it's within a classroom, teachers, everybody's looking for innovation, or if it's, within your leadership team, where and how do you carve out the space for that to happen?
Well, so the way we did it was we used a software solution. We ran an event that was 3 or 4 weeks, where we asked staff to log in and share problems, ideas. It was an open platform. it'll take me a while to go into a lot more detail, but you use technology so that you don't have to take people's time in the day. They go in when they want. There's no obligation, but they can go in when they're sitting at the couch in the evening or on the weekends. They can go into the platform and they can see what other people are posting, and they can share a thought, or they can comment on someone else's idea. They can post their own idea. There's a free exchange of ideas. And again, these are people at the front line who, feel the pain of things that aren't working. And so they're motivated. They want to see things get better. And so you're really not imposing into the workday. You're really creating a space where people can go when they want to. And you create that social environment. And you're maybe only going to have 25 or 30% of your workforce that's going in there in a meaningful way. But that's actually a very high number. And when you have that kind of energy and people are actively engaged in that way, there's some good energy. And that's once you get to a certain point, and then you have you kind of structure it as an event, and you say, okay, we're done with socializing. Now it's time to vote. So there's a voting mechanism, and so you participate in that. And, we would get done with that 3-4 week runway, and we'd have a list of 50, 60 ideas, all rank ordered based on what the staff thought were the most interesting, compelling, best ideas. And we'd take the top 2, take the top 3, and we'd run a design thinking workshop. We'd invite staff to come in and, hey, we're gonna design a test of this idea. So come in and help us do that. We'd get 10, 15 staff who'd come in after school. We'd have a pizza, and you'd go through the process. I mean, it's more complicated than what I'm describing, but what I'm trying to say is there's a way to do this, and you don't have to interfere with people's workday. It can be done by choice, not by obligation. And if you structure it the right way, it's an invitation for people to come in and be a part of an innovative, environment. And you've got a group of people out there who are dying for that, who wish that existed, but it doesn't. So they don't have nowhere to go with those ideas. And that's been my experience. When you create that space, the people who are looking for that opportunity, they show up. And they're really fun people to work with because they're very creative, and you'd be surprised.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, I'll provide the next question.
Thanks.
I see what you're up to, adding pizza into your answer. So you definitely you've done your research, so thank you for that.
If you were to say a certain kind of pizza,
But,
Maybe donuts next time.
Donuts.
Donuts does work too.
So if you just bake that into all your answers.
All right. It's a good tip.
But anyhow, in all seriousness, I'm a community member first and a parent before I was on the school board. And one of the experiences I had in that role, or before, more importantly, being part of the school board, was when it comes to advocacy for my own children, there's two things. I didn't always feel that I was able to ask that magical or that right question at the right time to truly be heard. And then with that, I don't always feel that I was able to access then the information I really needed to get the answers and to answer the why that I had as a parent. So my question to you is, how would you go about creating or helping access to community members to our school district? For example, there's a number of parent groups this past year that really worked hard to access us or the school district. And we did our best. We'd meet from time to time as board members with them when we could. But there still seems to be an aspect of whether or not people feel or perceived access to us. Yeah. And that comes out as transparency at times as well. So how would you work with that, and how would you help alleviate that potential concern?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. When I was looking at the survey results from 2017, and it said, that the community had an 89% favorable opinion of teachers and a 68% favorable of administration and board. You know, that when I saw those numbers, you know, I knew that that was not what you want to see. You know, that's 68% is, you know, as a leader, I'm sure you weren't happy with that number. 89% for teachers is great. That's a good, you're right in a good zone there. But 68% for leadership and the board is below expectation. And that and that kind of data point on that survey ties back to what you're talking about. You know, the frustration that community members feel that they're not having access, leaders aren't listening, et cetera. That's what shows up on a survey like that. So, and you know, I think a lot of boards struggle with this because it's not easy to give every parent and every parent group exactly what they want and or need. But it's the job, and you have to do everything you can to accomplish that, right? So what would I suggest? You know, I think it is, you know, it's necessary to be ready to meet with those parent groups and to be, you know, in a setting of their choosing, to be ready to listen. And it's going out and doing that. And bringing that information back to talk about as a board, to say, okay, this is what this group is asking for. This is the frustration that this group has. You know, I think it's the hard work of a school board, but I think if you want to move from 68 to 78, that's what you have to do. I know you all did it during the construction bond. I know you were all out meeting, having coffee, going wherever you were asked to go, right? So it's like doing that all the time. It's like being ready to go out and meet with groups and hear what their concerns are, and accepting that that's the job. Now, you know, I don't want to be naive. I mean, it's not easy to meet the demands of every group, every parent request. What I'm saying is, I think as a board, you've got to make every effort to, you know, to do it in a way that is reasonable, that gives the community the impression, the feeling that you're making that effort all the time. And this is a fantastic board. I have spent, you know, a little bit of time with you all. I can tell this is a high functioning board. I think being present out in the community and listening and taking the time to see how could we make this work better for you and your specific interests, it's worth taking the time to do that. Again, easy for me to say. I haven't been here in your shoes and been fielding the requests, but in my experience, this is how boards often feel, that they feel like there's a lot of requests coming and people are unsatisfied with the access they're being given or the amount that they're being heard. So I don't think you're alone in feeling that. I just don't think there's a way other than to continue to do your best to be present with those folks in the community and be listening and bringing it back and having that kind of discussion here. I don't know the details of what they're asking for, the specifics, but just in a general sense, I don't think you reach the level of what I call customer satisfaction without being ready to go that extra distance and be meeting with community members on their turf and listening and genuinely trying to bring their issues and concerns back to the board, the larger group here, with an interest or an effort in trying to find some common ground. Yeah.
Eric, perhaps a quick question. Last week, we had asked about what would the top three things you would focus on coming to the district. One of them was academic performance, which you've touched on that a lot. the pieces with the decline in enrollment and some assumptions and great ideas on what we need to do to bring that back. But a third one that I think, if I wrote this down right, was related to, I think the term you used was operational efficiencies.
Yeah.
And, one of the things as a business owner myself, when I think about an operating levy, I get a little nervous about that, particularly after all this construction bonding that we went through and what it's done for our taxpayers and our business community and homeowners, et cetera. So I wanted to just get a better sense of what you mean by operational efficiencies and what kind of experience you have in I think you had indicated to do better, to do more, do better with less. Mm-hmm. And it's a business mindset. It's something I think that our district lacks, and probably every school district probably lacks, just because we're always trying to catch up, it seems like. But I'd be interested in some of your thoughts on
Sure.
that or examples that you might have.
I would say that it's a mindset. When you turn a corner into sort of budget reduction, I think you need leaders who have an eye on every budget line that they manage, no matter what it is. Release time for professional development. You've got a line for that. How do we cut back in everything that we're doing to some extent? You're talking about, to use a business term, you're talking about a haircut, right? You're not talking about slashing budgets. You're talking about how do we start to pull back a little bit without hurting operations. So that's why I call it operational efficiency, right? We all have budgets we manage, but what could we be doing with our budgets to reduce? Where are there opportunities to not spend, and it's not going to hurt the outcome? That's what I'm talking about. And it's something I've participated in those processes. There's always something we can find in the budgets that we manage that we could say, yeah, I could probably hold back on that, and I think we could make it to the end of the year. I would hope. After I saw the revised budget in January, I would hope that those conversations are already happening, because I think it was going to be a $1 million deficit or excess spending, and it doubled to $2 million. So, you've got to be looking at every opportunity to hold back expenditures when you're looking at a deficit that's doubled from your initial projection. So that's where I'm at. And I've been in those situations where we've said, okay, hey, it's February. We've got to all look at our budgets differently from here forward, because for whatever reason, something's changed. And, I'm assuming some of that's already happening here. I've managed budgets where I've had to do that, and I know there's always places where you can hold back and, not cause damage to the outcome. And that's what I mean with operational efficiencies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, I am sad that you didn't get to see more of our high school, but we do have a new area for all of our tech ed and that kind of stuff. And you had mentioned, I think it was called Vantage.
Yeah.
Where the district's partnered with local businesses, and that's something that we're really interested in doing more of, and I know it's a task that our principal has had. So can you talk about how you financed this program, if there were additional costs, and then how it worked and how you went about that?
Yeah. Well, so the basic concept was to bring together two different content areas, or three in one of our programs. So an interdisciplinary curriculum that would align with a career pathway. And the thinking was that this would be, instead of your kind of traditional classroom experience, it would be much more project oriented. Sometimes people think of project-based learning, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what projects are like in a typical work environment, meaning that There's 4 or 5 people working on the project. They all have different roles. And what you're essentially trying to do is you're trying to teach juniors and seniors project management, which is a skill that they need in the workforce, right? So they need to know how to work on a team of 4 or 5 colleagues, all with a different job title. And they have to know how to contribute to that project in a meaningful way based on their defined role. So you'd have you'd build a project where one student would be the director of communication, one student would be the director of marketing, one would be the director of product development, right? So they'd actually be trained to approach the project from that perspective. And again, you teach kids those things. You don't expect them to know those things. And then you actually have projects that come to you from your local business partners. So, maybe it's from Essentia Health, and there's some kind of aspect of their, maybe their communications department is running a new campaign, and for some new program that they're going to offer. So that would be a project that the business partner would give to the teachers who are running the program, and they would not only give the project, but they'd offer a professional mentor, someone who would actually meet with the student team every 2 or 3 weeks, and basically check in with them to make sure that the project was on track. There would be an expectation that, after 5 or 6 weeks of this, the runway for this project, whatever the timeline is, that at the end of that runway, the student team would present their results to the business partner. So the students would actually go to that Essentia Health, to the board meeting room at that facility, and there would be executives from Essentia who would sit there and say, okay, present your findings. And the students would be expected to do that. They'd stand up, they'd have a slide deck, they'd say, we've looked at this problem, here's the solution that we have built, and here's how we came to this conclusion. We researched this project by talking to this group, here's the data from all those conversations. So we've built a solution for how to market this new program, and here's how we would suggest you do it. Now, is Essentia going to use that suggestion from the students? They're not obligated to do that, but you'd be surprised how often a business partner will say, this is good, or we're going to use part of this, or, this might have been a project that they didn't have the capacity to actually run, so it was sort of what we would call a circular file project, and they just rescued it and brought it to the kids to see what they could do. We had Best Buy gave a huge data file once to a student team and said, see what you guys can do with this. Carlson, Travel said, we're trying to figure out new coupons for weekend travel, and here's a gigantic data file. Take it apart and see what you can learn from it. So there's all kinds of different business scenarios that your partners will bring to you. The trick is training students in project management, making sure that the curriculum that sort of undergirds the courses. For example, we used AP Statistics. That was a fundamental course for our global business strand. Senior English, so they had to do a lot of writing and presenting, et cetera. So you're using core curriculum, but and that's all happening as they go through the term. But what's happening alongside is they're being assembled into project teams. They're being given a special assignment. They work collaboratively with that group of peers, and then there's a presentation at the end. So there's 2 things happening. There's the curriculum, but there's also this project management component. And so what students are learning is they're learning project management. They have a mentor that they have to work with. They learn how to talk to adults in a professional setting. They learn how to send a professional email. They learn a lot of skills that we don't teach, frankly. And so what happens, and I can tell you, because I helped build this program and I watched it grow from year to year. You talk to a student in that program at the beginning of the year, and they're a regular 16-year-old high school junior. You talk to them at the end of the year, and it's a completely different young person. They look you in the eye, they shake your hand, they have a conversation with you. They grow up a lot in that kind of a program because they're given the opportunity to really stretch. And I was a high school principal for 6 years, and I can tell you, I would walk from classroom to classroom. I saw more boredom on a daily basis than I ever want to see. And in a program like this, where the curriculum's relevant and kids are working on real problems, you don't see boredom. And kids would tell us over and over again, I wish my entire day was like this. That's
So is that one elective class alongside of their core classes? Is that
right, but it's not an elective. It's core content. So I'm talking about AP Stats is a math course and senior English and maybe you throw in a business class that makes that third course. So you've got 3 courses in a straight 6 schedule. That's half your day.
Okay, so it's part of those 3 courses.
Right, and only one of those classes is actually an elective, the business class, because math and English are core content.
Yeah. Interesting.
So there's a lot more to say here. What I'll say though is, we had an advisory group that was all business partners who would meet with us regularly. They'd advise us. Every single strand had its own business partners that would provide mentors and et cetera. Once you get something like this rolling, it's like a snowball because people want to be a part of it. Vantage now has 8 or 9 strands. It's got design marketing, it's got digital journalism, it's got, there's all these different ways of building these career pathways. The key is you don't want it to be pure elective. You want it to have core content so that kids aren't burning up their electives. And you want that rigor that comes with core content. So having English in there, social studies, math. We put in advanced placement as much as possible just to give it an extra boost because we had students that really wanted that challenge. But interestingly, the kids who wanted just AP classes, they didn't take Vantage. The kids who took Vantage were the kids in the middle, who weren't the high flyers, but they weren't the kids who were struggling just to make ends meet. They were the kids in the middle. And that's something I think school districts get criticized for a lot, is what do you do for the kids in the middle? And this kind of an experience is an absolute bullseye. And the business community loves it, and the kids love it. And again, they'll get offered summer internships. There are all kinds of things that'll happen. And again, my favorite story is when Morris Leatherman surveyed our voters before 2015 operating levy, the slice of our voters who are most likely to vote against the levy, Vantage was their #1 favorite program in the district. So we might have brought some definite no votes over to the yes column because we built a program that really was clearly aligned with the business interests of the community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Eric, as you can tell, like the questions seem to divide into 2 different things, like what have you done, what will you do?
Sure.
So I'm gonna throw another what will you do question at you. From your interview last week and from just, the way you've presented yourself since we've gotten to listen to you, it's very clear that you've done a prodigious amount of homework about the Brainerd School District before you showed up for your first interview. And I, for one, appreciate that a great deal, I think. So given that, coupled with the day you had today, which, was first you were kind of in a lab, like, sort of simulating what the Brainerd School District looked like based on your impressions. And then you got to come and experience all the different things that you experienced today. So I'm going to ask you kind of maybe it's a tough question, maybe it's not, but let's just assume that this water bottle has a genie in it. And the genie only has 2 wishes left because I used the first one to become fabulously attractive. Was a joke? Nobody? Nothing? What?
I get it now.
As you unleash those 2 wishes, right? And think of this board as the genie. What are 2 things that you've learned both through your research and through your experience today that you could ask this board that we theoretically would have the power to grant you day 1 when you get here that would theoretically get you off to a running start as our new superintendent?
Well, I'd say a 2-month head start. Yeah. I think I said that last week. I think that I don't think there's a lot of time to lose. Families are making decisions about where they are going to send their kids, and they're making those decisions right now, for next fall, right? And, I don't think there's a minute to lose to change that narrative and get those families to start thinking about coming back. So, it would be more runway. It would be more time to get started sooner and to get the things in place that I think need to get in place. Summer's a tough season for us because people go away from schools, and it's harder sometimes to get work done in July. And there's, and I would just, that to me would be one of the biggest challenges of starting on July 1 is we've got a lot to do, and do we have the people here that we need to get the things done? So that's one wish. I get two, right? I don't know if this counts, but, I would wish that the decline in enrollment are those three things I talked about earlier. Because I think we can solve those things. If it's something else, then that'd be a tough sled. But if it's the things that I think we can change, and if you could promise me that, can you promise me that? Is that an actual wish I can ask for? Is it those three things?
Is it those three things?
Is it COVID?
I think you get a different answer as you go around this table, right?
Because you've
I
talked to
think
the
they're huge
families.
factors for sure. I don't think anybody would dispute that. I think it's a little more of a complex tapestry than that.
Yeah.
That, is unique to our community perhaps.
Right.
But that's what maybe we would be looking for somebody to tell us, right? We know us.
Yeah.
We don't know somewhere else.
So I guess maybe, okay, so let me replace that wish with a different one. I would wish that, and this might tie in with my other wish of getting a head start, I'd love to be able to get an end of the year survey out to parents before school's done. I'd like to start drafting it now. I'd like to have it out in the first week of May. And I'd like to really encourage all parents to fill it out and, electronically submit it before June 1. If we could have that, have a really robust data set that tells us, finger on the pulse, what are parents feeling right now? And I'm not talking about a 10-question survey. I'm talking about lengthy, a thorough set of questions. And really emphasize with families how important it is that we get this information. That, we're going to bring in a new superintendent, and it's really essential that he has a really good understanding of what the perceptions are, so that we can come together and build a plan. That, to me, would be a great wish.
Thank you.
Okay, we've been going almost an hour, so,
I have another question if I can.
Perfect.
Can I throw it in? Or?
yes, no, we have time. I just
Oh,
wanted to
okay.
go and let you know that we're nearing the end, so.
Okay. Eric, you've earlier today in the community questions, you commented about that the district it's like a business, and I for one 100% agree. And I think it's unfortunate that in many cases we don't run it as a business. Now there's going to be a lot of people in our community that say no, it's not a business. It's all about the kids, and we know it's all about the kids, but we're providing this service. One of the things that I think is unique with yourself, and I had mentioned this last week afterwards, that my sense is you'd bring a bit of a non-traditional approach in how you would, as our superintendent, take us from good to great, to move us forward. And, certainly your 30 years experience in the education field, but even more particular, probably the last few years in a business setting, still tied to education. So I am interested to hear how you think your, what I consider a little bit non-traditional, your business experience, how you think that can benefit yourself coming now back into the public school system and helping us advance.
Well, I'll tell you that what I was able to experience being an executive in a privately owned company is that we don't dance around the fact that it's a business. We talk about it all the time. And I think that's the difference, is in education, we dance around it. You know, when I was a high school principal, my athletic director would come into my office. We knew we were running a business. Athletics is a business. We're hiring and firing coaches. We're taking gate. We're running big budgets. And we're supporting 24, 25 varsity programs. It's a business. There's a great student experience happening, but there's a lot of business management that's happening with every single one of those teams that we're running. So, you know, I think, but we would close the door and we'd say to each other, we're running a business. So we're not dancing around it. I think, you know, I thought it's refreshing when there's community members saying, like, you know, let's agree this is a business. It's a business of providing amazing experiences for kids, but there's a business model underneath it. You know, when you're in the private sector, you don't ignore the fact that there's a business model. It's something you talk about all the time. So for me, that's something I've sort of added to my vernacular from being in the private sector now, and meeting with investors and sitting at a table with people who are putting millions of dollars down in favor of the company. So that's different. There aren't a lot of educators who've had that experience, so that does make me unique. But you know, I also have a lot of years in the traditional system of working in a traditional way with other traditional educators. So, you know, as much as I've got those disruptive qualities that might be a little scary, I've also done all that in very traditional school environments and got achievement results every place I've been. So, you know, I know that I'm a little bit different. You know, I know compared to a lot of other educational leaders, you know, I speak a little different language. But, you know, for me, it really boils down to that I think we can do better. And I just can't, you know, I can't not bring that to whatever leadership role I'm in. You know, I did that when I was a principal. Luckily in Minnetonka, that was embraced, right? Everybody felt that way. And so I was sort of among, you know, kindred spirits. But, you know, for me, you know, we've all got to be working a lot harder to create the kind of environment that kids deserve. And, you know, I mean, it's complicated. You know, I met with the kids today, and, you know, they've got real concerns and real issues. It's not different from other places, but, you know, you can't spend 45 minutes with kids and have them ask the questions they were asking me and not say, okay, we got work to do. You know, there's things here that, you know, that need attention, right? I'm not trying to be critical of the principals or anybody, but, you know, we've got to be committed to doing everything we can. And I'm just driven by that. And it's, you know, maybe I'm not as delicate as I need to be sometimes with the way I phrase it, but, you know, it's a passion of mine, and I've seen it work, and I think it's a better way, you know, to be more direct and to talk about accountability and to talk about goal setting and to be clear that this is what gets you to excellence. You know, there aren't a lot of school districts that can claim that. And I think part of the reason is, you know, we don't have that willingness to really push ourselves. And that's, you know, I would like to be a superintendent in a district where that was what the board wanted. You know, and when you said good to great, now it's funny because, you know, good to great, Jim Collins, the first thing he'd tell you is hire internally, right? And, you know, I hope you don't, but that's what Jim Collins would say, you know, the author of the book. He said you build a culture and then you hire from within, because that's how you're going to, you know, that's how you get the outcomes that you desire. Now that maybe applies best in an organization where they have established the kind of culture that they know leads to excellence. And maybe that's the case here and maybe it's not. But, you know, I'm a fan of Jim Collins, and I've read the book a couple times, and I know he would say, go with your internal candidate.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, yes, yes.
What does successful diversity, equity, and inclusion look like? And how will you involve our community in doing so?
Yeah. Well, I think that's I've definitely, I've watched the board meetings. I've read the first letter, the second letter. I've studied your framework. I've looked at all the documents, and I've read the minutes from the task force. So I've got a little bit of a sense of the work that you all have done around equity, and I applaud that work. The conversation I had today with the teachers when they asked about it, as I said, that what I think is really important when it comes to that equity work is it's got to be done in partnership with the community in a really genuine and authentic way. And I think what happens sometimes in school districts is they get out a little ahead of the community. They leave the community behind a little bit, and they get a little further down the path than the community knew about or was comfortable with. And for me, in my experience, that's a recipe for trouble. That it's got to be done at a pace and with your community partners in a very deep and authentic way. In the letter that you all wrote and signed, it was, that last paragraph talks all about, partnering with Central Lakes College, partnering with surrounding districts, partnering with, right? There's a whole list of folks that you're going to partner with. And so what I would say is that's got to drive the work. It's got to be a full partnership with a lot of different groups. If it's Brainerd Public Schools out in front and all alone, that's a hard road. And I'm not saying it's the wrong road. I'm saying it's a really hard road. And I would much rather tackle that work with a really diverse set of partners where everybody is kind of holding hands together and we're not leaving out parts of the community. Everyone's included and invited in. I think that's the key. Now, when I talked about this with the kids today, what I said to them was, and I really like, Kevin, you use the example that equity is like, we don't make everybody wear a size 9 shoe. Wasn't that your quote? It was a good one. And I used that today with the kids. I said, think of it this way. We wouldn't make everybody wear a size 9 shoe, right? I stole your bit, but I really liked it, and I thought it was a great way of kind of explaining what equity means. It means everyone deserves to wear the size shoe that fits, right? What we should be doing every day with kids in our schools is making sure that they're getting the help, the support, the environment they need to be successful. And when that's not happening, we pay attention to it, and we see what we can do to change that, right? And that's, to me, that is equity. That's equity with a lowercase e. It's us doing our jobs really well every day to make sure every student gets what they need to be successful. Now, capital E is a letter and policies and a very public process, which is good and important, but you can do both, and they can look and feel a little bit different. The lowercase e is happening today, right? I mean, it's people are doing lowercase e every day. I really admire, I like the framework a lot. Those are, I mentioned to one group today, I said, there's 34 questions there. And that's like a 10-year, process of unpacking. Those are rich questions. That's not a small initiative, right? That's a major initiative. Each one of those 8 areas could be a year of work, right? So that's a major effort. I would want to be doing that with a large group of partners in a really, community-driven way. That would be my wish.
Thank you. Just the size 9 shoe thing real quick. Hopefully you had better luck. I seem to recall getting booed by the room that night.
It's a tough crowd, but I really mean it. It really stuck with me. I thought it was a great, I don't know, came up with that yourself or where that came from, but that was a really good bit. I'm going to keep using it, with your permission.
One more.
I've got one last question. You know, our community is asking for, and I think really deserves, a leader that they feel they can trust and demonstrates commitment and putting students first and our district's interests first. How would you answer to and build trust with a group that's voiced some character concern, and how you might show up for us given some of the cloudy circumstances of your departure from your last
Right.
appointment?
Well, you know, I would want to meet with that group and talk about it a little bit because, you know, the circumstances there were that I was being asked by a lot of other school districts for help. And it's hard to say no to school districts that wanted to learn from the success that we were having. And, you know, probably the biggest mistake that I made there was that two of the districts that we were helping quite a bit were two of the districts that we drew enrollment from at a very high level. So Minnetonka takes about 38% of its enrollment from its surrounding school districts. So you can imagine, not a very good neighbor. If you're taking 1,000 students from Eden Prairie every year, it's not going to build a good relationship. So the fact that I was helping Eden Prairie was a concern, you know, that, you know, perhaps naively, but, you know, I felt and I still feel that the right thing to do is to help each other. And, you know, I stand by that. I don't think that's a cloudy circumstance. I think my core values were pretty solid. And, you know, if anybody had a question about my commitment to Brainerd, based on that circumstance, I would say, well, you know, if Pillager came to me and wanted to know how we're getting those science scores, you better believe I'd tell him. Because I would want Pillager to do well too.
So along those lines, I was saving roughly the same question for last because I felt it would have been unfair at the beginning of this interview to make you delve into this. But I also think in terms of fairness, you deserve to know that, you know, once your candidacy came forward, that various elements came forward, some in favor, some trying to spread some doubt, some going so far as to share the elements of the fact that it was a closed session when your resignation was submitted and accepted by the school board in Minnetonka back in August of 2019, right? So I think it's fair to give you one more chance too, just add any other clarity to the picture that you can, because there's been a lot of, and it came up even in our comments from the sessions. And then we also got emails. A couple of board members here, we proactively reached out to Dr. Peterson. He was neither helpful nor non-helpful to clarification on this situation. So I'd say to just kind of wrap it up and give you any other opportunity you want to kind of share those things because they're floating around out there.
Yeah. And I understand that, and thanks for bringing that forward. You know, I would say this. I would say that, we negotiated a mutual agreement when I departed. And that agreement has some pretty clear language about kind of how we talk about each other and, you know, non-disparaging, et cetera. And, you know, so it's disappointing for me that there would be people who would, you know, kind of go around that agreement and take a personal, you know, whatever, you know, everything that happens, and you guys know this, is public record. So you have freedom of information on anything that happens in Minnetonka. So, you know, I don't hide from that. You know, I stand by, you know, the way I led in Minnetonka. I think my record of leadership there is every review I ever had from Dennis Peterson was exemplary. We had pretty significant performance pay incentives every year, and I always got every penny. So, you know, there can be people who want to look back and characterize things differently than how I would. But, you know, I stand by my performance there. I know that the work I did, and, you see letters of recommendation from the high school principal, from one of my direct reports. My work there was transformational. I mean, we built programming there that to this day is the programming that that district thrives on. So it's do I regret that things ended in a less than harmonious way? Absolutely. But, I know that my contract gave me permission to consult. And in the end, it grew to more than what was probably best for someone in the public service domain. So when Dennis brought that to me and said, this has gotten to be too big, I said, okay. And so, I didn't want to leave. I offered to say, well, I can detach from all the consulting. We don't have to, I don't have to resign. There's another way. And he didn't want to go that way. So I accepted that decision and moved on with my life. But the work I did there, the people I worked with, everybody I know who talks to me, they stand with me, and they know that the work I was doing there was unique leadership work. So, and I'm proud of it.
Thank you. I apologize. I just felt we needed to have that out there for you to answer.
No, you're fair to do that.
And follow up, because it came through in some of the concern, people, I think, probably know about some of that consulting work and probably even admire it, but there was a concern, and obviously that would come through contract structures and that sort of thing, but people were concerned, are we going to get a part-time superintendent who has a part-time consulting business?
Right.
So do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think it's a little bit hard to kind of recreate that scenario, but, what happened for me was, I was a runner-up for the superintendent position in Edina. And when that didn't go my way, the board in Minnetonka offered me a new contract that was financially attractive. They didn't want me to leave. And Dennis Peterson wrote the clause that allowed me to consult. He did it himself. So, there's an irony to that. But I had no idea that would end up kind of being my undoing there. But because, again, there was a lot of interest. And, we had a lot of school districts that were coming to us wanting that kind of, consultation. I have no interest in doing that anymore. That was a bitter, sweet, pill. And I am, at that point, for me, that seemed a way to, help other districts to be able to explore something that was really interesting to me professionally at a time in my life where that was attractive. I enjoyed helping other districts. It was a passion of mine. It didn't end the way I would have wanted it to, and I don't have any interest to go back and do more consulting. I'm interested in finding a school district that sees in me the talent, the skill that I know I have inside, and they want me to come and be a leader in their district. I'm not naive. You have two other great candidates, and I know I've got the people reaching out to you and being critical of me, and that's hard. But that's part of being a leader. You put yourself out there, and you're a target. You all know what that feels like. And so, I feel sometimes, leadership, it's almost not a choice. It's just who you are. And I have always been a leader. And I feel like my core values are solid. I was trying to help other school districts. I was doing it in a very professional way, and my work in Minnetonka never suffered. And I would find it very hard to believe that anybody in Minnetonka would sit here and say that I ever did not satisfy any goal or expectation that anybody had for me. So, I can put my head on a pillow at night. I know what my values are. I took pride in helping other school districts and, you know, I'm not saying I would do it all again the same way, probably wouldn't, but I don't think it was a lack of an internal compass or beliefs. It was, I was in a school district that was, that had a business model around open enrollment, and my consulting was threatening that business model. And I get that in hindsight, and, I'm done consulting. Whether I land here in Brainerd or somewhere else, I'm going to give myself 100% to that district.
So that statement, and I apologize, Chair Nelson, one other thing that came through that I want to look at our consultants too to make sure that I'm asking an appropriate question, but people really have there's a lot of pride, and probably in a lot of communities, but when we're here, we're immersed in it, a lot of pride in the history, and people really want someone who's invested and want a superintendent who's going to live and breathe and exist in this, not just in this building Monday through Friday, but be a thread in this community.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a fair to ask me, for me to ask you to respond to that if people are concerned.
I have to say that it's not a legal question.
It's not illegal, or it's not
It's
illegal?
not, it is illegal, yeah. I'm saying that, and
Sure.
just because I feel.
That's why I looked at you guys,
like
wanted to,
I need
yep,
to
yep,
say that,
yep.
but you cannot ask a candidate about their intentions. of
Sure.
what they would do.
Sure.
Well, having not heard that question, I'll just make a comment that there's only one way to do this job right. And that's, you have to be in the community, fully embedded. And that's the right thing for you all to expect. And I wouldn't be here if I wasn't ready to make that kind of a commitment. And again, I think I've got pretty good track record. I have relocated for a job and did so successfully, and I am confident I could do it again. This is a lot closer than Napa.
Our wine's not as good.
That's true.
Oh.
I haven't tasted it. Anyway. Thanks.
Are we good?
Yes.
Everyone good? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Eric. It's been a long day.
Yes.
It's been good to get to know you a little bit more,
Yeah.
and safe travels back tonight. You got a long drive well, it's not that long.
No, it's not that bad. No, I've really enjoyed the chance, and again, I have I think a good understanding of where I sit, and I'll just say that I've really enjoyed learning about Brainerd, and it's I'm going to be cheering for you guys no matter what. So it's a great community, and I've enjoyed the chance to meet all of you and folks here today. So thanks for that opportunity.
And
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. You did do your homework.
Yeah, well, again, there's one right way to do this stuff, and you got to know what you're walking into.
Okay.
All right, thanks, everybody.
So again, no review and comments tonight. We'll do that tomorrow night. Our next meeting is tomorrow. Well, I'll be here at 4:30, 4:45, and then dinner, and then interviews. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
First from Director Blacklance, a second from Director Spear. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you, yeah. It's been fun.